really close, right from the factory. I'm impressed. So if you're thinking of replacing the carbs on your RD400 or a similar bike, you'll definitely want to watch this video. There are a few pitfalls I even ran into. Didn't realize how complicated this was going to be until I was done. And I've tried to share all these things that are pitfalls on this video. Today is the day we've waited for a long time. I wanted to have a dedicated shop day to install. I have two brand new Mikunis carburetors that are replacements, but not exact replacements for the carbs that are on the bike. And if I can get these to go on as conveniently as I hope, there is some drilling to do, there is some fitting to do, and it just isn't as simple as you think it is for a lot of reasons. First off, there's two separate chokes, there's no connecting line, no balance tube, but we're going to see if we can get these to fit. Now, I've had this bike, it's going to be going on 10 years, put over 11,000 miles on it, and I really like keeping it running on the razor edge. So right now, this may be the last little piece of the puzzle to get it really running crisp. So there are several small issues to doing this. And actually, to be honest, truth in advertising, the last time I did this is when I restored the bike for Ray Straub, the black and gold one. And it went extremely smoothly for a lot of reasons. What Ray had done is Ray had gotten the carburetors brand new from Sudco, had them jetted to exactly what he wanted. In this case, these are jetted totally stock, what a stock setup would be. So we are in the process here. The first process is I'm going to have to remove a stock carburetor. There's a lot of little, it's not a big thing, it's a lot of little things that all have to be right. And the biggest one is I'm going to have to drill holes for where this has an embossment of where that would go, and it has one on each side where they want the drill to be, but it's got to be a super precision hole because these oil lines have to plug right in. So that's one of the considerations. The other consideration is there is not a balance tube. The stock carburetors have a balance tube between them, which we're not going to have on this project. And the other thing is that the choke. So to get this in perspective, when you have a stock bike, the one choke chokes both of them. Well, on this bike it's not. So we're going to have to reach in when we want to choke both cylinders. I have a feeling most of the time one choke will do it. I don't know, since the carburetors are not exact replacements, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get in and get the adjustment for the slide. I don't know how that's going to be on the inside carburetor. But again, it's a lot of little things I have to work out. It's not going to be a 5-minute job. I purposely kept this for a shop day that I was not going to try to do 2 or 3 things in this day. I don't want to compromise this because this is a bike I've had almost 10 years now. Like I said, I have enjoyed every mile I've put on it. We've done major modifications, paint work. I have extra engine parts. I probably have enough to keep this bike running for 20 more years. I'm not going to be running for 20 more years, so it's pretty easy to figure out. But the first step is just let me show these carburetors up close and personal. They're brand new from Sudco. They're roughly 150 bucks a piece. And if you get a set, ask for the Sudco catalog. They'll throw it in with a set of carburetors. So the other decision, if you're going to run premix, you don't need to worry about drilling the oil lines and adjusting the oil pump cable. We want to keep the bike relatively stock. I want to use the oil pump, the stock setting, and I'm going to have to do, again, drill those precision holes. But that's one thing, and I know this is not going to be a 5-minute job. What happens a lot of times, and you shouldn't fall into this trap, you look at the carburetor, say, oh, it looks exactly like the other one. And you take the other one off, and it's just these little detail things that have to be addressed, or you have to learn to live with them, one or the other. But again, I would suggest, number one tip, if you're going to do this kind of a job, dedicate a day to it. It's not going to be a 5-minute job, and we'll be riding by lunchtime. Now, an important thing to remember, these are not... They're not exact replacements. They're the same diameter, the same size, and they do have the stock, all of the stock parts that would be in the stock carburetors, but they're not the little, again, the little detail changes that you have to deal with. If you're not aware of that, and you start this job on a day that you think you're only going to have an hour or so, probably going to be pretty disappointing. And I want to emphasize that right up in the beginning before we even start taking things apart. So the first thing I wanted to evaluate some of the things I'm going to have to deal with here. This is a stock carburetor. It's still mounted on the bike. It has a smaller fitting that marries up to the petcock perfectly. Well, now we're going to have to deal with the fact that on the replacement carb, this is the next bigger size up. So I don't know how that's going to all work out, but again, that's the challenge of this kind of a job. A couple other little tips that I include. I always safety wire my oil lines in place, but this has to be a press fit. This can't be a sloppy fit. So drilling that hole is going to be critical, and I'll spend a lot of time figuring and getting that just right. The other thing is, because the stock carburetors are mirror images, in other words, this adjustment screw is on the other side, on the other carburetor. Very convenient. This may be, with the new replacement carbs, a little less convenient. I'll have a choke on this side, and I'll also have this on the other side of the carburetor. I'm going to have to figure if I can get in there with a screwdriver or adjust it by hand, and it's something that has to be done from time to time, well, with any two-stroke. The last thing, once this is all done, the oil pump setting has to be verified or changed or brought back to where I want it, which is exactly where it is on a stock engine. I don't want to have some custom setting. And it's always been my habit to add a little bit of two-stroke oil whenever I fill up with gas. I'm not sure that I'm going to have to do that in the future. We're going to find out. And one of the reasons I've always added a little oil is I always wanted to have a little bit of oil in the fuel tank so that when it sat over periods of the winter where I wasn't riding it, I didn't develop any rust inside the tank. And it seems to have worked pretty well over the years. And usually when we go for a ride on the RD, usually we're with other people with two strokes, so Luciano, Mark Morgan, for instance, and we ride them pretty hard. So that extra little bit of oil, cheap insurance. So again, an issue that I have to deal with. This is the stock fuel line, and you can see it's not a good fit. And when we just replaced these recently, and I don't know if I'm going to need new fuel line. This is already past its shelf life, I think, but I really just would like to get it all set up and running today if I possibly can. But the biggest thing is, and I repeat it over and over, because if you know ahead of time what these little pitfalls are going to be, it makes the day a lot more enjoyable, a lot less frustrating. Now, just to be honest, I checked around a lot of sources of places that sell parts for these bikes. Nobody had a direct, brand new set of carburetors. That was in the unobtainium. So that would have been my first choice. Brand new in the box from Yamaha. Not available. Sudco is certainly a good second choice. So first step on this, pretty straightforward. Phillips screwdriver, loosen the clamps front and back. I have to take my safety wire off, which is not stock. I have to pull this oil line out, and I will then pull the whole carb out, and then after the carb is out, I got to get rid of the fuel line too. After the carb is out, unscrew the top so that it'll just be easier and I won't be prone to kink the cable by doing it that way. Alright, so these are Phillips screws, and I just got to make them loose enough that I can slide the carburetor out. That one's already loose. And these are the kind of screws that if you don't use the right Phillips screwdriver, if you try to use one that's not correct, you wind up stripping the screws. And once that safety wire is off, this can just come right out. And it's this hole that's not in the new carburetors. So that's one of the little tricks we're going to have to deal with. And one of the things that, if you didn't notice was coming right now, you'd put the new carburetor and go, uh-oh, where did we put the oil line? And with the clamp off these boots, if it was a little warmer out, the boots would come right off. But when it's cold like this, they fight you every inch of the way. All right, so that's going to come out. And we got, take the top off, and we'll have the carburetor out in our bare hands. Anybody that's got a two-stroke knows how to do this, because if you're going to jet any two-stroke, you're going to be jetting it from time to time, and in this case, this will come right out. There's our slide. Don't let the spring jump out. Oops, this comes right off, and this piece will be replaced. We have a new rubber piece. Just for reference, somebody that might not know, this is the balance tube that goes between the carburetors. I believe all this does is it's that you have one choke, and that this activates the choke for the other side. However, if it leaves the choke, the rich and mixture in there, it's just a piece of tubing. But we're not going to have this on the new setup. We're going to have two separate chokes. So again, just for reference, this is the way this would normally come apart. And when you're pulling the needle out, there are a few screws in there. This has to come out. You raise or lower the needle and put it back. And again, that's a whole separate issue for what we're doing here. And it's addressed very well in the Sudco catalog. If you buy a set of carburetors, just ask them for the catalog. It's a beautiful book. So with the old carburetor out, and I will of course put this in a clear plastic bag for storage for future whatever. But keep in mind what happens. This is a 44-year-old piece of aluminum. There's oxidation inside of it, and even though you clean it and you can wire clean the jets and you can do this and you can replace this and that, but overall this is just a little bit deteriorated over what it would be if it were brand new. And what I'm looking for with this motorcycle is that crisp little edge, and also that it takes the gas beautifully. I found from doing the restoration for Ray, when he bought the new carburetors for the bike, night and day better. So that's what we're hoping is going to happen with this. Now just for reference, you can see here the original one, and this is something would be confusing to some people. Whoops, let me knock that over. This has a bigger fuel inlet. Again, this is a generic carb that they use on a lot of different things. This is the carb that has everything set for that year motorcycle. But they're close enough, and I know other people that have done this restoration that have done exactly what I'm doing, that have always said well worth the time and money to do it. The bike will run so much better with a brand new carburetor than something that's 44 years old, and you never really know where it's just not exactly right. A slide is worn, and all the passages doesn't even matter. This one's brand new. I wanted to just share some information here that may or may not be new to you. Of course, this is the Viton tip shut-off valve. This goes back together very conveniently. But one of the things, and it's something, like I said, this is a tricky thing. If you look down that hole, and that's where our oil line is going to go, you'll notice where it comes out in the carburetor, and I don't know, it's right in front. There's a little, and I'm not sure I can even focus on it, there's a pinhole. Now we're not going to be able to use that hole, because we don't have that area. We don't have this molded into the new carburetor. So we're going to have to use the one that they show, and this is where it gets to be tricky, and that's why I wanted to make this video and make it clear how I wound up doing this. I've done it once before and it worked fine. I'm hoping this is going to work exactly the same way. So notice the stock Yamaha carburetor. It has a piece for the oil line. We don't, but we have this boss here. Let me just try to get my camera focused in on this. This is where we're actually going to put the hole. And we're going to make that hole a press fit to the oil line. And the other one we have to do on the other side. And you notice they had that in mind, I think, at some point in time. They put that boss on both sides. What we don't have is this. This is the part that's different. And so when you go to do one of these conversions, and it's very obvious right in the beginning, yeah, you got to do that, you have to do that, but sometime a little thing like this, if you don't understand that that's where the oil is coming out, right in front of where the pilot jet comes out, right in front, it's a pinhole. It's a tiny pinhole. If you look down there, and again, I'm trying to show it, but again, we don't have perfect lighting here. And don't confuse it with, I'm just doing this for information's sake. I'm not sure I can even do it here. It's just a pinhole, and it's right in front of where the pilot jet exits out in front of the slide. Now, this carburetor, different. The pilot jet exits out in a much different place, so we don't even have that place on the new carburetor. So that is the crucial thing from this video that you can pick up. Now I'm trying to share all this information because, believe me, years ago when more people were riding two-strokes, this was a lot more widely known. This was something that everybody pretty much knew, or you pretty much couldn't ride. Well, nowadays, fuel injection is such a wonderful thing. I love the new MT-09 with the fuel injection, but I know if the day ever comes that it doesn't work, it's going to be a bigger problem than it is doing this. So anyway, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. I want to make sure this gasket goes exactly the way it's supposed to. There's a little tube it has to go over. Anyway, we're going to put this aside. We're going to go downstairs and try to get a precision drill and drill that hole exactly where it should be. And that should be a relatively straightforward job since we have plenty of precision drills. We just want to make sure we get it right. All right, it's all back together, ready to go downstairs, where it's a lot warmer, by the way, and get this hole drilled. Now the biggest trick is going to be to see if I have a precision drill the exact size I need. So the first step is to pack the side of the carburetor so that when we drill this hole, and we're further down than that, none of the chips are going to fall in there, and we can really carefully clean this out once we have the hole exactly the size we want it. So luckily, because I do have the correct drill, whoops, as it falls over, I'm trying to show this. Let me turn it up so you can see it. One is, I know this is a little tricky, but one is just a thousandth or two too small. That's perfect. And then if that's not a tight fit, we'll go through it. This one is 2 thousandths more. So we'll have two choices. I don't want to make it sloppy. I want to make it that it's a press fit, because don't forget, I'm replacing, and this might be something I have to consider, this is a thinner amount, and I don't want this part sticking into and making a Venturi effect. That would make a Venturi effect. When I'm all done, I have to trim that off so it's nice and flush. And it may be a little more of a job than you think it is, but this is the only way to get it done right, that it'll be just like a factory job. Now in the vise, I wanted to make sure it was level this way and not tilting this way. I like that hole to go straight down. This will help. So the first step, using a slow speed, I'm trying to get a nice pilot hole in here, and I'll do that and then put in the precision drill. Okay, we have the pilot hole. Now we're ready for the precision drill. So what I want to do now is just using a piece of an old nail file, just flatten that surface perfectly flat and get any burrs, any little things that are going to keep this from being a really nice fit. We're looking for a press fit, but not one that I have to use a hammer to install. I'll use some compressed air. There's the compressed air. Clean this out real good. Make sure we have no chips going in, and that should be ready to install. Now we'll go check the fit right now. Now the next modification we have to make is I have to trim that much off. Let me see. I want that to be even, and I can just do that with a Dremel cutoff wheel. And once that's trimmed, that'll just be a perfect fit to the inside. I'll just go to the sander and just grind that little by little till that's a perfect fit. And boy, this is such a nice precision fit. You can pick the part up and that doesn't even twist. That's a nice precision fit, and that is a critical thing to do. Now keep in mind, one of the things you could always do, just run premix, and you could avoid all this aggravation. But I think it runs best when you have, to be honest, you have a little bit of oil in the fuel, and at the same time have the oil pump metering in a measured amount. Okay, that is in there nice and tight, and I'm not sure you can see, but you can't even feel it with your finger. So that is now exactly what I was looking for. Now that one's ready to install, but I thought, hey, time for a nice good coffee break here. There's no rush on this now. We're in the catbird seat, and then I'll do the opposite side. And the most important thing on the other side is not to forget to drill the oil hole, because they're on opposite sides. And that's obviously something you have to remember. Oh, when those rubber boots get cold, what? Boy, they get brutal. I'm going to manhandle this a little bit here. Oh, there we go. Okay, both carbs are off, both oil lines are off, both fittings, the fuel lines are off. We're ready to go set up that carburetor number 2 in the cellar and then come out and start the assembly. Now, I just did a little safety thing on this for my own use. I put a black dot so I wouldn't, by mistake, drill the wrong side, because we know that can happen. Anyway, and we got to trim that fitting. That worked out great. Boy, that couldn't have been a lot better than that. This one is in the bank. This one will go a little bit quicker, but it's not a race anyway. And boy, that is just, I'm really going to be happy when this is installed on the bike. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look like the rain is going to stop today, because I was hoping by the time I got this done, I'd be able to get a test ride. Looks like we're going to be postponing that for a day or so, or more. So doing the second part is just redundant. It's exactly the same. And of course, the biggest thing is to remember that I don't put them both on the same side. And so what I've done, of course, is marked it so I wouldn't forget. Now, if you're a senior citizen, maybe that's a great idea. A really good tip is with the old parts before we start to assemble the new carbs. I like to store these. I have 3 other sets of carburetors. They're stored in plastic bags. Well, I hope I'm never going to need them, but if I'm ever going to do any other restorations or rebuilds or anything, what this is a great set of spare parts. If I ever need a needle or a fitting or one of these little parts, it really pays to have these in good shape and in storage and know where they are. So that's probably the most difficult part of the job, is getting precision fits that those are press and airtight. And at the end of it, I've blown WD-40 through those, the little passageways, make sure there's no little chips or anything in it. So we're basically ready to put the carbs back on the bike. Now it's about 45 degrees. It's supposed to go to 50 today, but that rain is making it feel like it's 30. So the first thing I wanted to do is I put the quartz heater over by the bike just to warm everything so it's not frozen cold, because what's going to happen, these get rock hard, and I may even have to take these off if they get hard. These are 40-year-old parts, 45, 43-year-old parts, and when that rubber gets cold and old, hard to get the carbs back in. So what I did before I even started this, I made sure all the screws were tight, and I wanted to make sure I'm at the mid setting here. I want to check, and that looks really close to being right. Of course, we're going to do the final adjustment with the cable. I want to make sure this is out 1.5 turns, which is stock, and this is what when they deliver them. And that's a good place to start with our tuning when we actually get a riding day. Now, just to mention, so people know, the replacement on this, these are more modern carburetor, even though they're the same size and the same jetting and everything. But here's one of the differences. You have an ability to change the main jet. Now you really can't do this. You know, change the main jet, you'd have to take the float ball out. Well, on these carbs, it's a lot easier. And sometimes on an RD, you could slide it, you could just turn it, take the cap off, and get in there and change the main jet when you want to do some tuning, especially if you're doing it and you know you're going to do it over and over and over in the course of a day. Here's a really useful tip. I think it's a useful tip anyway. What happens is I want to put these parts on, and this rubber is cold and hard. Well, sometimes makes it a lot easier. I may have to take these back pieces off. I'm not sure yet. We're going to give it the old school try first. We'll find out. And of course, the ultimate thing, if you could do this on a warm day, just like changing a tire, same thing. And because the parts are warm, it just makes it a little bit easier. It just certainly doesn't make it a snap job. You've got to really wiggle this around. And the thing here is, I don't want to force anything. This old dried up rubber, sometime, I don't know how old these parts are, and it would be prone to crack if you just force it in a way it doesn't want to go. Now sometimes they really fight you every inch of the way, but having the stuff warm is the biggest answer. Just like exactly the same as mounting a tire. And now we've got that part in there. Of course, we're going to have to line them up so the two carbs are parallel. They're not off to one side. But that basically is one side done. One side in place. Now I'm just making all the clamps just hand tight. I still want to be able to move this back and forth for getting the slide in if I have to. These clamps, I don't want them flopping around right now. And the next thing is we want to get the throttle cable attached to the slide, and since we know we don't have the adjustment, it's just going to be in plenty of slop. Leave plenty of slop in everything right now. Okay, the sequence is this is going to get pushed up over the cable. This is where we adjust our throttle cable. We're going to have to put this in. This is a modern rendition of the parts we've taken out. There's no screw holding it in. The needle is in the middle, which is where we always start tuning, and we are ready to just assemble that and see if we can get it to go in. There's a slot and a little notch as you drop it in. Let me see if I can show this on the little tang, and that makes the lineup relatively easy. Not relatively easy. A lot of times this becomes a thing where you wish you had extra fingers. The little rubber boot that keeps the dust and dirt out. I want just enough of the rubber boot up in the air that I can make the adjustment. I can see what slop I'm ultimately going to have in the cable when I make the adjustment. I said at the beginning of the video, this was trickier than you think. Here's one of the reasons why. When I went to put the new, this is the new cap, and this would be a relatively straightforward thing. The cable does not fit in. This is a smaller diameter, so I'm going to have to take this brass piece out of the old carburetors, because this brass piece on the old carburetors has a wider lip, and if I were to put it in this way, this would not be a good way to do it. It would be well, it'd be prone to misadjustment and slop and wear. So here's another really good tip. People are really serious about doing this, or if you're anticipating doing this upgrade to your Rd400, you save the pieces from the old carb. So being totally fair, you could buy this part from Sudco, but I'll show this up close and personal. It's going to be, well, I may have to take this. This is the one that fits, and we're just going to do a direct replacement and hope that the threads are exactly the same. I don't have to rethread it, but you can see the difference in the diameter. And this one will contain the cable. This one may be made for a different application, I'm not sure. But the lesson here is always save the parts. People that laugh at me because I have cabinet after cabinet of used motorcycle parts, sometimes you just need one little thing like this and it saves your whole day, as opposed to now we would have to order these from Sudco, maybe wait a week. Bike could be sitting here, I wouldn't be able to ride it or test it. This just saved my bacon. So once I have the cable in place, I can drop the needle in. I can drop my little retainer in, let the spring back down, get the spring to go up in there, and it looks like we're going to have to twist the carb a little bit to get this to go in conveniently. Let's see if it does. I don't want to bend the needle or scratch it. And once I know that little tang is lined up, and it's a question of, and sometimes these get hard to catch no, this one right away. I keep forgetting this is new stuff. Almost like cheating. Once this is on, I just need to make sure that I'll get this down all the way. Yep. Next thing, I'll take the hairdryer, warm up the oil line, since this is old rubber too, and get that pressed in place. And if it's not a real good fit, and the way you'll know if it's a good fit, if it starts oozing oil from time to time, then I'll safety wire it. If I don't have to safety wire it, even better. But I will safety wire at the very end of this job. Once I know it's all running and I'm done with my tuning, I'll safety wire these right around the carburetor. And that's just overkill from the days of racing these things. And that just worked out real nice. That's beautiful. So now this side, I basically can hand tighten all the screws. I'm not going to make anything rock tight yet. Just so this one doesn't move around while I go around on the other side and put the other one on. Pretty much redundant to exactly what we did, except from the other side of the motorcycle. Since this is repetitive of same of the other side, I just want to make sure everything's nice and warm here. I got the hair dryer out, I got the carb ready, and once I get these parts warmed up, I want to do this as relatively quickly before the parts cool down. Of course, if you're doing this in a sunny, bright sunny day, that's not a factor. And on really cold days like this really pays for itself, having that quartz heater, because it just makes everything a little warmer than room temperature. And then having a hair dryer just before you put the parts in, it's worth its weight in gold. That's the best tip in all of motorcycling. Whenever you're dealing with old rubber that's hardened, get it warm. And if you're using a heat gun, be careful, you can catch it on fire. That's for sure. Parts are warm enough, sometimes you can just use a Phillips screwdriver to get them into the final piece, and that is another good tip. But that rubber better be soft or warm or both. And when rubber is 44 years old, this is a 1977 bike, so you do the math. Now with this part done, we get to the tricky part. We've got to adjust the cable. The first thing, make sure before you do the cable adjustment, under the tank, the cable, the junction snaps into a little snap. If that's not in the snap, this gets to be very inconsistent. It's got to be in that snap before you can go on to any of these adjustments. Make sure that's there. Make sure we can work and that's moving. Everything's good. Okay, I haven't pulled the rubber boots down yet because we're going to adjust the cables from that little ferrule that we replaced from the old carburetors. And before I do that, I'll warm up the oil line, get that in place. Just make all the clamps, these clamps aren't even on yet, get them all hand tight so everything, and make sure the carburetors are parallel. And then the final thing is going to be, well, getting the cable adjustment so that both slides rise and lower equally. And the final thing, once that's done, is make sure we're in the oil pump cable, those 3 cables junction under the tank, and that's adjusted correctly. And once that's done, then we'll be ready to just go out and take a test ride. But looking outside at the weather right now, better day for drinking coffee. Okay, so you get to the oil pump adjustment, we have to remove these 3 screws, take this cover off. Now the next step is to get the oversized fuel entry into the carb and the petcock exit, which is smaller, and the filter, which is the size of the petcock. I've got to come up with some kind of a concoction here. And luckily I have a lot of tubing. Now because the filter is the size, maybe I'm not going to be able to do exactly what I want. Maybe. These are the kind of things you don't know. I've got to come up with some solution to this problem. So I have a roll of 5/16, and I thought, well, as a last resort, I really don't like to use this real heavy stuff, but until I can get a replacement, and I was wondering if it's going to fit in. Yeah, they've got to put a clamp on there. Boy, there's no real super good solution. Everything is like a, but I guess I gotta ultimately get some more fuel line. That's one of the things, and just make up something temporary today so we can run the motorcycle. Now keep in mind, this is a temporary solution just so I can run the bike today. What I have is, this is motorcycle fuel line, which of course is a lot softer and a lot thinner. This is automotive. Well, I got some here. You can see it side by side. Well, this, yeah, you could use it. I guess you could, I'm not sure. But here's the thing I wanted to do. What this is This fits onto the filter exactly the way I want. That's good. But it won't go over a 5/16 fitting. Now you can see what's happened at this end. Somebody's already heated this with heat. And so here's the trick that I found that works. Share this trick. Of course, I'm just doing this as a demo. Heat the tubing. Put it inside one of these pair of pliers and do this while you're heating it. And what that does, it eventually will become, if you do it a minute or so, what'll happen, that piece will fit right over a 5/16 fitting. Now, that's not the right way to do it. What I'm going to do is look for other filters, but I need to be able to connect a 5/16 tube to a 1/4 inch. Maybe I just need to get an adapter, but it would be nice if I could find one of these filters with 5/16 on one end, 1/4 on the other end. Again, that's not what I'm here to do today, and I'm not. That can be a subject for another video or whatever, just like the tuning. I just wanted to get some gas in the bike and see if it's going to run on the first kick or if we're going to be stranded here. But anyway, this will be something. That by the way, this is a temporary fix. I wouldn't want to do this and then, go for a 10,000 mile ride. But that will stretch the tubing just enough that you can get it over a 5/16 fitting. And there's what happens. You get a piece of 1/4 inch tubing that really doesn't fit on that. By using the pliers and some heat, combination of both, we've got a stopgap thing until we can get some fuel tubing. Now, a couple of things just to mention that are worth mentioning. I always like to have clear fuel line on my 2-stroke so you can see if gas, because you're always running out of gas, and see if when you go on reserve, if you've got any gas in there. Well, I may have to just abandon that, and I'm going to get some new fuel filters. I'm going to look around, see what's available. This is just a stopgap, but it certainly got us through the day today. Okay, this is one of the little downsides of not having the stock carburetors. I have 2 chokes. If I want to use 2, cold weather, and then I've got to reach in. And obviously that's something I can live with, and most of the time you don't even need the choke. One choke is enough, but that's not having the original connecting tube. And maybe you could, I'm just thinking you could drill 2 holes in there and put a connecting tube. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's worth the effort. But this whole thing, there's a lot, when you do this, and I've said it right in the beginning of the video, because I did it on Ray's bike and I did it on other bikes that I've done similar things to this, that there's always 5 or 6 little stumbling things that can ruin your whole day. And if you know about it ahead of time, you can get prepped. Like I should have prepped up by having more fuel line. Just shame on me. But anyway, that's why we make the videos. That's why we try to share the information. Caps for this set of carburetors, these caps, what happens is when that adjustment is all the way down, the throttles are still partly open, so that's a problem. I've got to work on that solution. I may have to use the caps from the other carbs. I don't know, and which way they're different. I've got to do a little checking on that. But that's one of the things. Again, that's one of the little pitfalls you run into when you do this kind of stuff. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to do this methodically, because I wanted to find out there's a difference in the 2 carburetors in the fact that the cable is not letting the slide go all the way down. So the first thing I did, I looked at the 2 tops and measured them with a mic, and they're exactly the same. So it's not that. I thought, oh, now the one part we did replace, and anytime you have a problem or something that doesn't go right, the first thing is go and put the old part back in. Well, I wanted to see how far down that cable went. This was the only way I could really realistically measure it. It went down that far, and this is what actually should be. Let's see. I want to get this as accurate as possible. Okay, that's how far down that goes. And then the one we replaced it with, well, let's see if it goes down even more. Because what's real now, it's pretty much the same. So pretty much that's not it. Now, I'm assuming, see, I should have figured this out. I've done enough of this kind of stuff in my life. The tip-off was when I had this all screwed in to get the cable adjusted with the new carburetors. this is what happened. By the time I got the cable adjusted, I was out of adjustment. So I thought, well, okay, now just to make sure that I'm not missing a boat here, my first choice would have been grind off that little ridge. That would have bought me a couple more thousands. I'm going to put this back together without the stop nut, just to see if that's the problem. Now this will allow, in essence, allow the cable to go down further. Because when I started the bike, it started like it was at, 20% throttle. Well, that's going to allow the cable to go down in further. So that's going to be the first test. I'm going to snap this all back together. Now, if that doesn't work, then I want to look at, I got the old carburetors out here already. I want to look at the dimensions of the slides. Now, they look exactly the same. That doesn't mean they are exactly the same. Now, in fact, they're not exactly the same. And I can tell you, I already know what the problem is. Here's what the problem is. If you look at the two slides, this slide, the cable attaches further up. So that means I may have to replace these slides or do the machining to put that piece. What I really need is that piece in this slide if I'm going to use that slide. But at least I know now it's not the adjustment. And that would be the telltale thing. This is the kind of stuff, when you're doing anything with custom bikes, there's already been 4 or 5 little things you could learn from this video. This is probably one. Okay, so for sure the problem is in the slide, and I don't know if they're interchangeable. Now the other difference between the old carburetors and the new, the old carburetors, this is aluminum. It's hard anodized, but it's aluminum. This part is 5 times as heavy. It's probably brass. I'm taking a wild guess it's brass, and it's chrome plated. So this is way heavier, but it's this little concoction here that lets the cable, the cable is really attached up here. So what happens when you're attaching it there, and it's my fault because when I was adjusting the throttle cable, I never let it go down to where it had slop. I would have known that if I let it go down. I just thought I'd adjust the idle once I got it all back running. That was a big mistake on my part. This'll be the correction. So the first thing will be just to see if these fit right into the new carburetors. That might be the answer. Maybe this is simpler than I think it will be. Now just to show you how precision these parts are, I put the slide from the new carburetor in the old one, and that is a real precision fit. That's amazing to me. Now I always think, well, what that means hopefully is that this one's going to fit in the other. Let's see if they have the same. I'm always looking for something. See, it doesn't. The new carburetors don't have this alignment for lining up the carburetors. You kind of have to do it. Well, in my case, you do it by eye, but I can tell just by listening to it. But anyway, yeah, I think the answer is going to be, we're going to find out the hard way, one way or another. Well, after checking this out, I realized I was totally wrong because remember, here's how you can tell. The carburetor that's made for Yamaha was made 2 separate mirror images. These are both the same. So this cutout where you would normally put the throttle stop, not going to happen. There's no cutout on this. So what that means to me is I have to use this part. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to come up with a way of putting this part, do some machining. And again, this is why I make the video, because a lot of people, I'm sure there are people that have a 350 or 400 Yamaha just run off and buy a set of carburetors and never realize how involved this is. So this is useful information. So what I really have to do, and it's going to be maybe I won't even get this finished today, I've got to be able to put this part in there, or else I'm not going to be able to use the slide that belongs in that carburetor. Oh, this is custom motorcycling at its best. So we're very lucky in one case, is that these floors are, and I'm doing this very accurately, they are exactly the same. So by putting these parts into the new, actually this is going to be a little trickier. I'm going to have to drill at least 1 hole, or maybe 1 bolt will hold this in, I don't know. But believe it or not, it's a perfect fit for the 1 hole And I think all I'm going to have to do is drill another hole on the other side, and that's going to solve the problem. But again, this is the kind of stuff, before you start a project like this, and I'm always prepared for this kind of stuff. I'm always ready, but it always sneaks up on you. So the final solution on this, I had to go down and drill two 440 holes. I was going to originally tap them, but this is brass. I'm not crazy about that, so I put a nut on them anyway. And that'll hold that. That'll give us the original clearance that we have. And this is something you have to consider if you're going to do a swap of carbs from two Sudco identical carbs that are replacing two on the RD that each one is a mirror image. You've got to take this into account. And this is the slide you have to use. So now that I know, I'm pretty much know this is going to work, I backed that down all the way. Of course, I got to take the side cover off and redo all the cable adjustments. But I know I've got the right amount of cable in there. So, boy, that was one I did not expect. I did not see that coming. But that is the whole, again, I just say it over and over again, the whole reason I like to look at a video. See, I would like to look at a video before I bought the carbs and see how much work this is, and just decide if you want to do this much work. You know, this is a lot of hours of work, but once it's done, having brand new carburetors, I think I'll bring this back to running on the razor edge. That's what I didn't have before. I had no clearance at all, no free play. So now I know, of course, I got to readjust all the cables, but I know I'm starting. I know that the slide has bottomed out and the cable is in free play. So we know we have correctly diagnosed the problem and solved it. Now I just have to do the other cable. Once I do that other cable, I'll be very happy. So in the course of doing this job, we learned quite a bit, and I'm hoping that I've been able to pass most of it, or some of it, on anyway, and know what you're getting yourself in for when you try to replace carbs with similar ones, but they're not exactly. And of course, it's possible. It's just a lot of little details, a lot of it's extra work. So, and there's always a way you can get it done, but it's always good. And I like to always know ahead of time how much time to allocate, how much money, how much energy. Next step is going to be, of course, just to adjust the cables again. Go through that routine. Take the oil pump cover off. Make sure we're in the mark. And until I get this, and this, of course, I have to do the final part of it on a day that I can do this outside. I can't really do it inside the garage here. So to be fair, to do this over again, I want to run the throttle to the stop, make sure that I have no play in there at all. Now, the first thing, I want to pull up on the cable and see how much slop. Oh my God, I've got slop up the kazoo. So I'll take some of that slop out. I can actually feel how much is in there. I want to get it that it just has a few thousandths of play, and that they're pretty much both the same. Okay, so we've got the play out. I don't need to put the lock nut on yet. I'll do the same thing for the other side, then I got to pull this oil pump cover off and see where we are. Now this is going to be trickier because we don't have the alignment marks on the carburetor anymore. So to find that spot, see, that spot is not full throttle. That spot is, there used to be a mark on the other carburetors. And you know what? I can't think of a realistic way of putting that mark on. I could measure it off the old slides, but I know we're very close to the adjustment we had with the other carburetor. So, and I know we were smoking just about the right amount. So, and I always have a little oil in the tank, so I want to just make sure. I think we got that. And you really can only do that adjustment until you get, once you have to get this adjustment right first. But anyway, I think we're close enough, and I've done this enough times to know there's always a final test. If the bike smokes, you're safe. It looks like those carbs, as they come from Sunco, are even set for a pretty close idle. They're idling at 1200. Amazingly close, right from the factory. I'm impressed. Well, it's smoky as hell in here. I wish we could go out for a test ride. We're going to wait for a really good day. Once I do the test ride, I'll button down all the little settings. This was way more complicated, even in doing raised bike. And on raised bike, we put bigger carburetors on it. These were the size that are supposed to be on this bike. Now, I have heard, and I've just added to the information, other people have told me, and people I trust their opinion, you can put bigger carburetors on these 400s, and yeah, if you go up one size, yeah, it's better, and if you go up 2 or 3 sizes, it turns into an unrideable bike that's got a lot of power. What I'm trying to do with this bike, keep it basically stock, and basically fun to ride, and basically on the razor edge, where when I go through the gears, it doesn't have a miss or anything. I've been using iridium plugs with really good success. I have not had to replace plugs in this bike, among other things. Other things, what can I say? And I always put a little bit of oil in the fuel, just in case. And when we're riding on a 2-stroke ride with Luciano or Mark Morgan or anybody with a 2-stroke, we ride the bikes hard. We don't ride them like they're Vespa scooters, you know. So, want to keep this baby. Karen bought me this bike for Valentine's Day 9 years ago, I think. And I have enjoyed, I put on over 11,000 miles. Maybe if I figured it out carefully, it's almost 12. A lot of that mileage, the throttle was wide open. So, and it's been a pretty good bike. Now, I'm hoping, the real hope is, we could all get over this COVID thing. And we could all go back to having big meetups at Choppers and big meetups at the market and Perry's and everything. Guys, I want to thank you once again. Thank you to all the healthcare workers. God, we wouldn't be riding 2 strokes. We wouldn't be doing anything without it. But keep in mind, if you have a bike like this and you're going to replace factory carbs with Sudco, they're the same size, but none of the fittings are the same. You should just know that it's a little bit extra work. And you should also know you can do it. I hope this video helped you figure that out. What has to be done, how you can do it, and never be intimidated by anything. Just my feeling, you just dive in and eventually, then you have to figure it out. Once you let the dog out of the pen, you know, you got to chase him. This bike, every time I ride it, I'm 18 years old again. And I hope you have, in your lifetime, you've had the experience of riding one of these bad boys. So, hope you enjoyed the video, share it with your friends, and thanks so much for watching. And to those of us who still love these 2 strokes, and I know we're a dying breed, thanks to fuel injection. But anyway, I try to do my part to keep the flame alive. These bikes really, they played a big part in my life and my love of motorcycling. I like to keep them alive, keep them running on a razor edge if I can. And the few of us that are left that still have them and enjoy them, we want to ride the wind out of them, and I'm certainly one of them. So I hope you did enjoy the video. It's a very complicated day today, and you picked up the tips if you decide to do a project like this, what you might encounter. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the friends that watch this and give me feedback.